My name is Janelle Richardson, and for a long time, I believed my life had already reached its breaking point. I was 38 years old when my husband died, and I learned very quickly that grief doesn't arrive all at once. It creeps in slowly, settling into corners of your life you didn't even know existed. Some days I could breathe. Other days, the weight of his absence pressed so hard on my chest that I wondered how my heart hadn't physically stopped. 6 months after David passed away, I was still learning how to exist in a world where he wasn't coming home. David had been 41, healthy, active, careful about what he ate. The doctors called it a sudden cardiac event, one of those phrases that sounds clinical enough to feel unreal. He kissed me goodbye that morning like he always did, told me he loved me, promised we'd cook dinner together that night. By lunchtime, I was sitting in a hospital room staring at a body that no longer felt like my husband. After the funeral, people told me I was strong. They meant well, but strength had nothing to do with it. I was just surviving because there wasn't another option. The financial panic came later. David's life insurance helped, but it wasn't endless. The mortgage, utilities, food, it all added up fast. I'd been working part-time in medical billing, a job that paid enough when there were two of us. Alone, it wasn't even close. So I took a job I never wanted, a night shift supervisor position at a distribution center downtown. The pay was good. The hours were brutal, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., 5 nights a week. I told myself exhaustion was better than losing the house, better than drowning in bills on top of grief. The house still felt wrong without David. Too quiet, too empty. Every room echoed with memories I wasn't ready to let go of. I didn't have a car anymore either. We'd only owned one, and after David died, his sister needed it more than I did. 3 kids, a broken down vehicle, and no other options. I sold it to her for almost nothing and told myself rideshare apps were temporary. That decision unknowingly changed everything. The first night after my shift, I requested a ride home at 6:05 a.m. I was barely conscious when the car arrived. A dark gray Toyota Camry pulled up, clean and well kept. The driver confirmed my name, my destination, and pulled away without unnecessary conversation. His name was Vincent. He didn't play loud music, didn't ask invasive questions, didn't complain about traffic or the early hour. He just drove, steady, careful, professional. By the time we reached my street, I realized how rare that kind of quiet felt. I tipped him $20 without thinking about it. He looked surprised but grateful, thanked me sincerely, and wished me a good morning. Not have a nice day, not forced cheerfulness, just calm respect. The next night, it was Vincent again. And the night after that, by the end of my first week, he had become part of my routine without either of us saying it out loud. He always arrived on time. The ride was always peaceful. Sometimes we talked lately about traffic patterns, early mornings, or how strange the city felt before sunrise. Other days, we rode in silence, which I appreciated more than he probably knew. Vincent was in his mid-40s, with tired but kind eyes. There was something about his presence that felt safe, familiar, like sitting in a room where nothing bad could happen. I tipped him well every time. It felt worth it, having one consistent thing in my unstable life. About 3 weeks in, I mentioned my husband. I don't remember planning to say it. The words just slipped out, heavy and unavoidable. I lost my husband earlier this year. Vincent didn't ask questions, didn't offer empty comfort. He just said, "I'm sorry. I know how that kind of loss changes everything." Later, he told me his wife had passed away years earlier. We didn't dwell on it, we didn't turn grief into conversation, but something shifted after that, an unspoken understanding, a mutual respect. My neighborhood had always felt safe. Tree-lined streets, familiar faces, the kind of place people moved to when they wanted quiet. I believed that safety still existed. I believed my home was still mine. I didn't know someone had already started watching.
The first sign wasn't obvious. It was subtle, small enough that I almost ignored it.
Before everything unraveled, my neighborhood felt ordinary in the best possible way. The houses were modest but well cared for, lawns trimmed, mailboxes upright. People waved when they passed each other on evening walks. It was the kind of place where nothing dramatic ever seemed to happen. And that sense of normalcy had been one of the reasons David and I chose it 8 years earlier. After he died, that same normalcy became my anchor. I clung to routine because routine didn't ask questions. Wake up, go to work, come home, sleep, repeat. As long as I stayed inside those lines, I didn't have to think too hard about the future or how empty the house felt without him. There were a few neighbors I interacted with regularly. Mrs. Chen, 2 doors down, would sometimes bring over food, soups, casseroles, small containers labeled in careful handwriting. I thanked her every time, though accepting kindness still felt uncomfortable. Across the street lived the Henderson family, their kids always loud and barefoot in the summer. Their noise reminded me that life kept moving forward whether I was ready or not. And then there was Gerald. Gerald lived directly across from me. If I stood on my front porch and looked up, I could see straight into the front windows of his house. Mid-40s, average build, thinning hair, the kind of face you forget 5 minutes after seeing it. Nothing about him stood out, and maybe that was the most unsettling part in hindsight. Over the years, we'd exchanged a few words, a wave here, a nod there. Once, after a storm damaged part of our fence, Gerald had offered to help fix it. David politely declined. Another time, months later, Gerald asked if we needed help with yard work. Again, we said no. He didn't push, just smiled and went back across the street. After David's funeral, Gerald came over with a card and a small bouquet of flowers. He said he was sorry for my loss, told me if I needed anything, anything at all, I should let him know. At the time, I appreciated the gesture. A few weeks later, he knocked again, mentioned he'd noticed my gutters might be clogged, asked if I wanted help cleaning them out. I thanked him, but said I had it handled. He smiled, said the offer still stood, and left. I didn't feel threatened. I didn't feel alarmed. I felt observed, maybe, but I brushed it off. I told myself he was just one of those people who liked being useful, the kind of neighbor who wanted to feel needed. Looking back now, I understand those moments differently. They weren't kindness, they were tests. At the time, though, I was drowning in grief. My awareness was dulled, my energy was gone. I wasn't scanning the world for danger. I was just trying to survive my own thoughts. The routine with Vincent continued. Every morning at 6:05 a.m., he was there. Same car, same calm presence. The ride home felt like a small pocket of peace before I returned to a house that still echoed with absence. I didn't notice the patterns forming around me. I didn't notice that Gerald was often outside when I got home. Sometimes he was checking the mail, sometimes dragging trash cans to the curb, sometimes trimming the same patch of bushes over and over. I told myself he was an early riser. I didn't notice that his waves were a little too enthusiastic, that his eyes followed me from the car to my front door, that his timing always seemed perfect. I didn't notice that occasionally things inside my house felt off. A drawer I thought I'd closed slightly open, a picture frame angled differently, a light switch in a position I didn't remember touching. I blamed exhaustion. Night shifts mess with your head. Grief makes memory unreliable. I convinced myself I was imagining things. I never once thought to check the locks. Weeks turned into months. I functioned on autopilot. Work kept my mind busy enough to keep the worst of the grief at bay. Sleep came in short, restless bursts. Vincent's presence remained steady, comforting in a way I hadn't realized I needed. Then one morning, something changed. It was a Thursday, I remember, because the warehouse had been chaos all night. A late shipment, missing inventory, frustrated drivers. By the time my shift ended, my head felt like it was full of static. I climbed into Vincent's car and immediately closed my eyes. For about 10 minutes, everything was normal. Then Vincent spoke. "Janelle," he said quietly, "I need to talk to you about something." His voice was different, tight, controlled. I opened my eyes and met his gaze in the rearview mirror. His jaw was clenched, his hands gripping the steering wheel a little harder than usual. "What's wrong?" I asked. "Not yet," he replied. "I need you to trust me first." My stomach tightened. "Trust you with what?" "When we get closer to your place, I'll explain. But what I'm about to do might scare you. I need you to know it's for your safety." My heart started to race. Vincent had never been dramatic, never vague, never ominous. Every instinct in my body went on high alert. "Vincent," I said, my voice barely steady, "you're scaring me." "I know," he said softly. "I'm sorry, just please trust me." The rest of the drive felt unbearably long. When we turned onto my street, I felt a strange sense of relief until Vincent didn't slow down. He drove straight past my house.
The moment he refused to drive away, I didn't know he was about to change my life for
"Vincent," I said sharply, sitting upright, "you just passed my house." "I know," he replied, his eyes flicking to the mirrors. My pulse spiked. "Then turn around." He didn't. Instead, he continued down the street, steady but purposeful, as if this was exactly where he intended to go. "Vincent," I said again, louder now, "what are you doing?" His voice stayed calm, but there was an edge to it I hadn't heard before. "I need you to stay with me for a minute. You're not going home right now." My chest tightened. 1,000 thoughts raced through my mind. Panic, confusion, anger. "This isn't funny," I said. "You can't just decide that." "I know," he said, "and I wouldn't if it wasn't serious." The houses blurred past my window as he turned onto the next street, heading away from my neighborhood. "Vincent, you need to explain," I said, gripping the edge of the seat. "Right now." He took a breath, as if choosing his words carefully. "Your neighbor has been watching you." The words didn't register at first. "What?" I asked. "The man who lives across from you," Vincent continued. "He's been watching you for weeks." A chill crawled up my spine. "That's not possible." "I wish that were true," he said, "but it's not." I shook my head, trying to ground myself. "You don't know that. Maybe you're mistaken." "I'm not," Vincent replied. "I wouldn't say this if I wasn't certain." My voice rose despite my effort to control it. "Then how do you know? How could you possibly know something like that?" "I've been noticing things, patterns, behavior that didn't sit right with me." "You're telling me my neighbor is watching me and you expect me to just accept that?" I demanded. "I expect you to listen," Vincent said gently, "and I expect you not to go home tonight." Fear surged through me. "Take me back. I'll call the police myself." "Janelle," he said, glancing at me through the mirror, "if I thought sending you home was safe, I would do it. But it's not." "Why?" I whispered. "Because tonight I saw something that confirmed everything I'd been suspecting." My hands started shaking. "What did you see?" "I'll show you tomorrow, in daylight, with evidence. But right now, you need to be somewhere public and well lit." The word evidence echoed in my head. "You should have told me sooner," I said, my voice breaking. "I needed to be sure," Vincent replied. "I didn't want to scare you without proof." We drove in silence for several minutes. Every instinct screamed that I should be terrified, yet some part of me trusted him. Vincent had never once given me a reason not to. "Where are we going?" I asked. "There's a 24-hour diner a few miles from here. We'll sit down, I'll explain everything. You won't be alone." I swallowed hard. "And after that?" "After that, we figure out next steps, together." I stared out the window, watching unfamiliar streets pass by. My mind replayed every interaction I'd ever had with Gerald. Every wave, every smile, every offer to help. Had I missed something? Had he really been watching me? When we pulled into the diner's parking lot, my stomach twisted. The neon sign buzzed overhead, casting a harsh red glow across the pavement.
It should have felt comforting, public, open, safe, but my nerves were stretched thin. Vincent parked and turned to face me. I know this sounds unbelievable, and I know I'm asking a lot from you right now, but I need you to understand something. I waited. I would never put you in danger, not ever. What I'm doing right now is because I believe your safety is at risk. My throat felt tight. Then show me. He nodded slowly. I will, but not out here. Vincent pulled his phone from his pocket and unlocked it. I'm going to get us a booth, coffee, maybe some food. You look through these photos while I'm gone. He handed me the phone. What am I looking for? The truth, he said quietly. Then he stepped out of the car and walked toward the diner. I sat there alone, Vincent's phone heavy in my hands. The screen was already open to a photo gallery. My fingers trembled as I scrolled. The first image showed my house. The angle was wrong, too low, too distant, taken from across the street. The next image was zoomed in. My breath caught. There, framed in the upstairs window of the house across from mine, was a figure. Gerald. I swiped again. Another photo, closer this time. Gerald stood at the window, his posture rigid, his gaze fixed directly at my living room. I swiped again. The image sharpened, zoomed even further. Gerald was holding something up to his face. Binoculars. My stomach dropped. The timestamp in the corner of the photo showed it had been taken days earlier. I scrolled faster now, dread rising with every image. Gerald outside his house, lingering near my mailbox. Gerald standing near my trash cans, rummaging through them. Gerald watching from his yard, his body angled toward my front door. Then I reached a video. My hands started to shake so violently I nearly dropped the phone. The footage showed Gerald stepping off his porch and crossing the street, toward my house, toward my front door. I watched, frozen, as he pulled something from his pocket, a key, my key. He locked my door and went inside. The video timer ticked forward. 2 minutes, 3, 4. Then he came back out, locked the door behind him, and walked away as if nothing had happened. My vision blurred. I barely had time to open the car door before I was on my knees in the parking lot, vomiting. Everything I thought I knew about my safety, about my home, collapsed in that moment. When I finally forced myself upright, Vincent was standing nearby, his face etched with worry. I'm so sorry, he said softly. I couldn't speak. He helped me inside the diner, guiding me toward a booth in the corner. He has a key to my house, I whispered finally. I know, he nodded. When the police started checking my house, I expected answers. What I found was terror. I sat in the diner booth, staring at the tabletop like it might swallow me whole. The smell of coffee and frying grease hung in the air. Sounds of clinking plates and low conversation drifting around us, but none of it felt real. My entire body was buzzing, like every nerve had been exposed at once. He has a key to my house, I said again, my voice barely audible. Vincent nodded slowly. I've seen him use it twice. Twice. The word echoed in my head, hollow and devastating. How long? I asked. How long have you known? I first noticed him watching about 2 weeks ago, Vincent said carefully. At first, I thought I might be reading into things. Same time every morning, always outside, always looking in your direction. But something felt off. I pressed my palms flat against the table to steady myself. Why didn't you tell me then? Because I didn't have proof, he said, and because I didn't want to frighten you unless I was certain. I hated how reasonable that sounded. When I saw him going through your mailbox, that's when I knew it wasn't harmless, Vincent continued. That's when I started documenting everything. He took his phone back and began scrolling, laying it flat between us. These were taken on different days, he said, different times. I came by your street when I knew you'd be at work. My stomach twisted. You came to my street? I asked. Yes, he said without hesitation, because I was worried about you. I didn't know how to feel about that. Relieved? unsettled, grateful, all at once. Vincent showed me more images, ones I hadn't noticed before in my shock. Gerald standing at the edge of his yard, staring directly at my bedroom window. Gerald holding a small camera with a long lens. Gerald lingering at my front door, scanning the street before stepping back. I saw him enter your house for the first time 3 days ago, Vincent said. I started recording as soon as I realized what was happening. My throat tightened. And this morning? He did it again, Vincent said. That's when I knew I couldn't let you go home. The waitress approached then, coffee pot in hand. Vincent ordered for both of us. I didn't object. I couldn't have spoken if I tried. When the waitress left, I leaned forward, my voice trembling. Vincent, when he went inside today, where did he go? Vincent hesitated. That hesitation terrified me. He went upstairs, he said quietly, toward your bedroom. My blood turned cold. How long? I whispered. Several minutes, Vincent replied. Long enough that I don't think he was just looking around. I felt dizzy. What do you think he was doing? I don't know for sure, Vincent said, but based on his movements, it looked like he was installing something or checking on something he'd already put there. The word installing echoed in my head. Cameras, recording devices, in my bedroom, in my bathroom, the places where I thought I was most alone. I shoved my coffee away, suddenly nauseous again. I need to call the police, I said, reaching for my phone. Yes, Vincent agreed immediately. We will, first thing in the morning. No, I said, my voice rising. Now. Vincent placed a hand gently over mine. I understand why you want to, but listen to me. I froze, torn between panic and reason. If you call right now without evidence in hand, they'll take a report, but they won't act immediately. And I don't want you anywhere near that house tonight. I swallowed hard. So what am I supposed to do? Stay somewhere safe, Vincent said. Somewhere Gerald can't reach you. I shook my head. That house is all I have left of my life with David. I know, he said softly, but your safety has to come first. Tears streamed down my face, hot and uncontrollable. I hated that he was right. Do you have family nearby? Vincent asked. I shook my head. Close friends? No. He exhaled slowly, thinking. There's a hotel a couple of miles from here. Clean, quiet. I can take you there. I can't let you do that, I said weakly. Yes, you can, he replied firmly. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the fear there, not for himself, but for me. I have a daughter about your age, he continued. If someone was doing this to her, I'd hope someone would step in. That broke something inside me. Okay, I whispered. Vincent paid the check and guided me back to the car. The drive to the hotel felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's life through a screen. Inside, he paid for 2 nights in cash and walked me up to the room. Promise me something, he said at the door. You won't go back there alone. I promise. And call me first thing in the morning. I will. When he left, I locked the door, slid the deadbolt, and collapsed onto the bed fully clothed. The room was quiet, too quiet. I lay there staring at the ceiling, replaying the video in my mind. The key, the door, the casual way Gerald walked into my house. My phone sat in my hand as I searched Vincent online. I needed to know he was real, trustworthy. His rideshare profile showed hundreds of 5-star reviews, comments praising his professionalism, his kindness. His record was clean. Slowly, painfully, I allowed myself to believe him. Then I thought about Gerald, about how ordinary he seemed, and I realized something that made my stomach churn. If Vincent hadn't noticed, if he hadn't cared, I never would have known. I thought I'd already lost my sense of safety, but what they uncovered proved I'd never had it at all. I didn't sleep, not even for a minute. I lay on the stiff hotel mattress with the lights on, fully dressed, every sound amplified by fear. The hum of the air conditioner made my heart race. Footsteps in the hallway sent panic through my chest. Each time a car passed outside, I flinched, convinced someone was stopping outside my door. My mind kept returning to one image: Gerald unlocking my front door. I pressed my palms against my eyes, but it didn't help. The picture replayed over and over, burned into my thoughts. How many times had he done it without being caught? How long had he been inside my home, touching my things, standing in my bedroom? The idea made my skin crawl. Around midnight, I grabbed my phone and stared at Vincent's contact information. I wanted to call him just to hear a familiar voice, but I stopped myself. He'd already done so much. I didn't want to pull him further into my panic. Instead, I researched Gerald. His name came up easily, too easily. He worked in IT for a mid-sized company downtown, divorced, no criminal record, no obvious red flags. The kind of man no one would ever suspect. That terrified me more than if he'd been obviously dangerous. I scrolled through old photos on my phone, neighborhood gatherings, random snapshots for years ago. In the background of a few, I noticed him, always on the edges, always watching. How had I never seen it? By morning, my head ached from exhaustion and crying. When the sun finally rose, I felt a strange sense of relief. Daylight made the world feel less threatening, even if nothing had actually changed. At 7 a.m. exactly, I called Vincent. He answered on the first ring. "I'm on my way." True to his word, he arrived 20 minutes later. We drove to the police station in silence. I didn't trust my voice not to break if I spoke. My hands were clenched in my lap, nails digging into my palms. Inside, we asked to speak with someone about stalking. A detective named Maria Santos met us in a small interview room. She had calm eyes and a serious expression that made me feel both nervous and strangely comforted. "Tell me what's going on," she said. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. Vincent stepped in, explaining everything clearly and carefully. He showed her the photos, the videos, the timestamps. As the evidence unfolded, Detective Santos's demeanor changed. Her jaw tightened, her eyes hardened. When the video of Gerald unlocking my door played, she immediately left the room and returned with another officer. "This is extremely serious," she said, turning to me. "You did the right thing coming here." Tears streamed down my face as the reality finally hit. "He might have put cameras in my house," I whispered. Detective Santos nodded grimly. "That's a strong possibility." I felt dizzy. She asked me questions about Gerald, about my routines, about anyone who might have access to my home. I answered mechanically, my mind still reeling. Within hours, officers were dispatched to both my house and Gerald's. By early afternoon, Detective Santos called me back into her office. "Janelle," she said gently, "we found surveillance equipment in his home, multiple monitors, recording devices." My stomach dropped. "We also found cameras inside your house, 3 of them." I covered my mouth, sobbing. "He's been watching you for months," she said quietly. Months. Every shower, every breakdown, every private moment. "We also found journals," Detective Santos added. "He was planning to escalate." Vincent's hand gripped my shoulder. "Gerald has been arrested. He won't be able to hurt you." I nodded, though it didn't feel real. That night, alone again in the hotel room, the weight of it all finally crushed me. I cried until my body ached. I thought about my house, the place where David and I built our life, and how it no longer felt safe. But beneath the grief and terror, there was something else: gratitude. If Vincent hadn't noticed, if he hadn't acted, I might not be here. The footage didn't just show where I'd been, it showed how close I'd come to something far worse. I thought the worst part would be knowing the cameras existed. I was wrong. The worst part was learning what they recorded. Detective Santos didn't rush me. She let the silence settle before continuing, as if giving my mind time to prepare, though nothing could have. We recovered hard drives from his house, she said. The footage goes back approximately 4 months. 4 months. That meant it started shortly after David's funeral. I pressed my lips together, fighting the urge to scream. He documented everything, she continued. Dates, times, your routines, when you left, when you came home, when you slept. My fingers curled into fists. Why? She didn't sugarcoat it. Because he was building confidence, studying you, waiting. Vincent's jaw tightened beside me. I could feel the anger radiating from him, contained but burning. Detective Santos leaned forward. Based on what we found in his journals, we believe he was preparing to enter your home while you were there. The words landed like a physical blow. Enter while I was home? I whispered. Yes, she said. And based on the escalation pattern, we believe that would have happened very soon. Soon. Days, not months. If Vincent hadn't stopped me, if I'd walked into that house like I always did, I couldn't finish the thought. He's being held without bail, Detective Santos said. Charges include stalking, burglary, illegal surveillance, and voyeurism. Additional charges are likely. I nodded numbly. Officers had already removed the cameras from my house. A locksmith changed every lock. Extra security measures were installed. Detective Santos told me my home was technically safe again, but safe didn't mean livable. Many victims choose to relocate, she said gently. You don't have to decide now. Relocate? Leave the last place where David still felt close? I swallowed hard. I want to see him. Vincent turned to me sharply. Janelle. I need to, I said. I need to look at him and know it's over. Detective Santos considered it. You can attend the arraignment tomorrow. That night, back at the hotel, the silence was unbearable. I replayed every memory from the past year, now tainted by the knowledge that I was never alone. I thought about the nights I cried myself to sleep. He saw that. The mornings I stood in the bathroom staring at my reflection, barely recognizing myself. He saw that too. Anger crept in slowly, replacing shock. Not just anger at Gerald, but at how easily he blended in, how predators didn't always look dangerous, how close evil could live to you without announcing itself. The next morning, the courtroom felt cold and unreal. Gerald sat at the defense table in an orange jumpsuit, hands cuffed. He looked smaller than I remembered, less powerful. When his eyes met mine, I felt nothing. No fear, no sympathy, just clarity. The judge read the charges. His lawyer entered a plea. When the judge asked if the victim wished to speak, I stood. You watched me when I was grieving, I said, my voice steady. You violated my home and my privacy, but you failed. Daryl didn't react, but I felt stronger with every word. Afterwards, Vincent squeezed my hand. You did good. Weeks passed in a blur of legal meetings, therapy appointments, and sleepless nights. The trial went and went. The evidence was overwhelming. Guilty on all counts. The sentence was long, long enough to ensure he couldn't hurt anyone for a long time. I sold the house. It hurt more than I expected. Packing up memories, letting go of a life I thought I'd have forever. But I needed space to heal. I moved into a small apartment across town. Ground floor, new locks, a security system I controlled myself. It wasn't the life I planned, but it was mine. And for the first time in months, I felt something close to peace. Healing didn't feel like relief. It felt like learning how to breathe again after almost drowning. Healing didn't arrive all at once. It came in fragments. Small moments where my chest didn't feel so tight, where my thoughts didn't immediately spiral into fear. Some days I felt almost normal. Other days I barely made it out of bed. Therapy became my anchor. Twice a week at first, then once. Dr. Moore was patient, steady, and honest. She never rushed me, never told me I should feel a certain way. She helped me untangle the grief from the trauma, the loss of David from what Gerald had done to me. Your vulnerability didn't cause this, she reminded me more than once. A predator did. I needed to hear that. The nightmares didn't stop immediately. Some nights I woke up convinced I was being watched. Other nights I dreamed of keys turning in locks I couldn't see. But they became less frequent. I learned grounding techniques, breathing exercises, how to bring myself back to the present when fear tried to drag me into the past. Work helped too. The routine of the distribution center, loud and demanding, gave my mind somewhere to go. My coworkers surprised me with their kindness. They didn't pry, but they showed up, checking in, covering shifts when I needed time off, even pooling money to help with my moving expenses. I cried when they handed it to me. Vincent remained a constant presence. We still shared rides most mornings, though I started using other drivers sometimes. Part of reclaiming independence. Vincent understood without taking it personally. "You're doing the work," he said once. "That's what matters." We met for coffee occasionally, usually at the same diner where everything had changed. It became a place of reflection rather than fear. "You saved my life," I told him one morning. He shook his head. "I paid attention, that's all." "No," I said firmly. "That's everything." I started speaking publicly a few months later. Detective Santos connected me with a local advocacy group for stalking victims. At first, the idea terrified me. The thought of sharing my story with strangers made my hands shake. But the first time I spoke, something shifted. Women came up to me afterward, some crying, some silent, all listening. They told me about neighbors who made them uncomfortable, about unexplained things in their homes, about fear they couldn't explain. They hadn't been imagining it either. I began helping women check their homes for hidden cameras, teaching them what to look for, how to secure doors, how to trust instincts without dismissing them as paranoia. Turning my pain into purpose didn't erase it, but it gave it meaning. 1 year after that night, Vincent and I sat in the diner again. "How are you really doing?" he asked. I thought about it carefully. "I'm healing, slowly, but genuinely." He smiled. "That's all anyone can ask for." Today, I still believe in kindness. I still believe most people mean well. But I also believe in awareness. Danger doesn't always look dangerous. Sometimes it looks like a neighbor waving hello. Sometimes it looks like help offered at the wrong time. And sometimes, safety comes from someone who notices what others don't. My life didn't return to what it was, but it moved forward, and that was enough. Even after he was gone, fear stayed behind, quiet, patient, and deeply familiar. I thought that once Gerald was behind bars, the fear would disappear. It didn't. Instead, it changed shape. The immediate terror faded, but what replaced it was something quieter and more persistent. A constant awareness, like a low hum beneath everything I did. I noticed exits when I entered rooms. I double-checked locks even when I knew they were secure. I listened for sounds that didn't belong. Dr. Moore told me this was normal. "Your nervous system learned to survive," she said. "Now we're teaching it how to stand down." That was harder than I expected. Some days, I felt angry at myself for not being over it already. Other days, I accepted that healing wasn't linear, that progress didn't mean forgetting, it meant learning how to live with the memories without letting them control me. The trial concluded with a sentence long enough to keep Gerald away from me for years. When the verdict came down, I expected relief.
What I felt instead was exhaustion. Justice didn't undo what had been done. It didn't give me back my sense of innocence or the life I'd imagined. It simply drew a line in the story. This ends here. And that mattered. I stayed in therapy. I forced myself to maintain routines. I allowed myself moments of joy without guilt. That last part took time. I felt guilty for laughing, for enjoying a quiet afternoon, for feeling safe again when I knew other women were still in danger. Dr. Moore helped me understand that survival wasn't selfish. You don't honor trauma by staying stuck in it, she told me. You honor it by healing. The advocacy work grew. Word spread quietly at first. Women telling friends, friends telling sisters. I started receiving messages from people I'd never met, asking how to check for hidden cameras, how to know if they were being watched, how to trust their instincts without spiraling into fear. I answered every message I could. Sometimes all someone needed was validation. Someone to say, "You're not crazy. That feeling matters." Vincent encouraged me in ways I didn't expect. "You're turning this into something powerful," he said once. "That takes courage." I didn't feel courageous. I felt like someone who had been pulled out of a burning building and was now pointing at the flames so others wouldn't walk in. One evening, as I walked into my apartment after work, I paused. For the first time since everything happened, I didn't immediately scan the room. I didn't rush to check corners or listen for movement. I just stood there, breathing. It was a small moment, but it mattered. I realized then that safety wasn't just physical, it was emotional, mental, internal. And slowly, piece by piece, I was reclaiming it. The hardest thing to rebuild wasn't my home or my routine, it was my ability to trust. One of the hardest things to rebuild wasn't my sense of safety, it was my ability to trust, not just others, but myself. For a long time, I questioned every decision I'd made, every moment I dismissed discomfort, every time I told myself I was imagining things. I replayed old interactions in my head, searching for the exact moment where I should have known better. Dr. Moore stopped me during one of those spirals. "You're holding yourself to a standard no one can meet," she said. "You're judging past decisions with information you didn't have then." She was right, but letting go of that self-blame took time. I started practicing something she called self-trust rebuilding. It meant paying attention to small instincts and honoring them without overthinking. If something felt off, I acknowledged it. If something felt safe, I allowed myself to believe that too. It wasn't about fear anymore, it was about awareness. I also had to relearn how to accept help. For months after everything happened, I kept people at arm's length. I didn't want to rely on anyone. Dependence felt dangerous. Vulnerability felt like an open door. Vincent noticed. "You don't have to do everything alone," he said one morning as we sat in the diner, steam rising from our coffee cups. "I know," I replied. "I just need to prove to myself that I can." He nodded. "Fair. Just don't confuse independence with isolation." That stuck with me. Slowly, I let people in again. A coworker invited me over for dinner. I went. A neighbor in my new building asked if I wanted to walk together after work. I said yes. Small steps, but meaningful ones. There were setbacks. Once I found myself panicking over a flickering light, convinced it was hiding something sinister. Another time, a man held the door open for me and my heart raced irrationally. I learned not to shame myself for those reactions. Healing wasn't about never feeling afraid, it was about not letting fear make every decision. The advocacy work continued to expand. I partnered with a local community center to host workshops on personal safety and home awareness. I never framed them as fear-based sessions. Instead, I focused on empowerment, what to look for, how to protect yourself, how to document concerns without escalating panic. After one session,
A woman approached me quietly. "I think you just stopped something from happening to me," she said. I held on to that moment on the hard days. Vincent attended one of the workshops once, sitting in the back, quietly supportive. Afterward, he smiled. "You're doing exactly what you said you would," he told me, turning survival into something that helps others. That night, walking home, I realized something important. Gerald had tried to make me feel powerless. Instead, I'd learned just how strong I could be, not because I was fearless, but because I kept moving forward anyway. I used to think strength meant surviving. I was wrong. Strength used to mean endurance to me. It meant pushing through pain, keeping my head down, surviving no matter how heavy everything felt. That version of strength had carried me through David's death and the months that followed, but it had also left me exhausted and hollow. I was learning that there was another kind of strength, one that didn't involve constant struggle. One afternoon, after a long shift, I caught myself standing in front of my apartment door, hesitating. Not because I was afraid, but because I was tired. Tired of being alert, tired of scanning, tired of holding tension in my shoulders like armor. I unlocked the door and stepped inside anyway. The apartment was quiet, peaceful, nothing out of place. I sat on the couch and let myself rest without guilt. That was progress. Therapy shifted focus around that time. Dr. Moore encouraged me to start envisioning a future instead of only managing the past. "What do you want your life to feel like?" she asked. The question startled me. I realized I'd been so focused on survival that I hadn't considered desire. I didn't have grand ambitions, just simple ones. I wanted calm mornings, honest friendships, work that felt meaningful, a home that felt like mine, and maybe, eventually, love again. That last thought scared me more than I expected. Trusting someone romantically felt impossible. The idea of letting another person close enough to know my routines, my vulnerabilities, my private spaces made my chest tighten. Dr. Moore didn't push. She said, "That door doesn't need to be opened yet. Just know it exists." Vincent and I talked about boundaries more openly too. Our friendship was rooted in something intense, something forged by fear and gratitude. We both understood the importance of clarity. "You don't owe me anything," he told me one day. "Not friendship, not loyalty, not rides." "I know, but I choose to keep you in my life." He smiled. "That means more." The advocacy work became steadier, less emotionally draining as I learned to pace myself. I stopped answering messages late at night. I learned when to refer someone to professionals instead of carrying everything myself. Helping didn't mean sacrificing myself. One evening, as I prepared for bed, I caught my reflection in the mirror. For the first time in a long while, I didn't see a victim. I saw a woman who had been tested and hadn't broken. The scars were there, invisible but real. So was the strength. And this time, it felt sustainable.
Progress didn't arrive loudly. It showed up in the smallest moments I almost missed.
The biggest changes didn't announce themselves. They arrived quietly, almost invisibly, woven into ordinary moments. I didn't notice them at first because I was still expecting healing to feel dramatic, like a sudden wave of relief or a clear finish line. Instead, it showed up in small victories. I stopped sleeping with the lights on. Not all at once. First, I turned off the lamp by the bed. Then, weeks later, I let the room go completely dark. The first night I did, I lay awake listening to my own breathing, waiting for panic that never fully came. That felt like a win. I started showering without rushing, without constantly checking corners. Some days were harder than others, but the fear no longer owned the space. I stopped flinching at every unexpected noise. I even laughed, really laughed, at work one afternoon, the sound surprising me as much as anyone else. For a moment, grief and trauma loosened their grip, and I remembered what it felt like to be present. Vincent noticed the changes before I did. "You look lighter," he said one morning over coffee. "I feel different," I admitted. "Not fixed, just steadier." He nodded. "That's how you know it's real." The legal aftermath faded into the background. Appeals were denied. Gerald remained where he belonged. Occasionally, I'd receive updates from the advocacy network about policy discussions or awareness campaigns influenced by cases like mine. It felt strange knowing my story had weight beyond my own life. I also began setting boundaries more confidently. If a situation made me uncomfortable, I left. If a conversation crossed a line, I spoke up. I no longer explained myself excessively or apologized for protecting my space. That might have been one of the most profound shifts of all. One night, walking home from work, a man crossed the street behind me. My heart raced automatically, but then I grounded myself. I slowed my breathing, stayed aware, and kept moving. Nothing happened. The fear passed. That moment mattered because it proved something important. Fear didn't get to decide my actions anymore. I was. In therapy, Dr. Moore asked me to reflect on how I'd changed. "I trust myself now," I said after a long pause, "even when I'm afraid." She smiled. "That's resilience." I still missed David deeply. Grief didn't disappear just because I survived something else, but the two no longer blended together in the same way. I was able to remember him without drowning. One evening, I lit a candle and talked to him out loud for the first time in months. I told him about my apartment, about my work, about the life I was slowly rebuilding, and I told him I was okay. Not because nothing bad had happened, but because I had endured it. That realization settled into me like a quiet promise. I was moving forward. One ordinary day, I realized I wasn't just healing anymore, I was living. There was a moment, small but unmistakable, when I realized I was no longer just recovering. I was living. It happened on an ordinary afternoon. I had the day off and no obligations. No therapy appointment, no advocacy meeting, no errands that had to be done. For once, the day belonged entirely to me. Instead of staying inside, I went for a walk. The sun was warm, the air clear. I noticed things I hadn't paid attention to in months. The sound of birds, the smell of fresh coffee drifting from a nearby cafe, the way the city softened when you stopped rushing through it. I sat on a bench and let myself exist without scanning for danger. That choice felt intentional. Dr. Moore once told me, healing isn't just about safety, it's about allowing joy back in. I was finally doing that. The advocacy work shifted again around this time. I stopped focusing only on awareness and started emphasizing empowerment, how to rebuild confidence after fear, how to reclaim spaces that once felt stolen. Women didn't just want to know how to protect themselves, they wanted to know how to live again. I understood that deeply. Vincent and I celebrated the anniversary of the night he refused to let me go home, not with sadness, but with gratitude. We met at the diner, ordered the same coffee, and sat in comfortable silence for a while. "You know," he said, "that night changed both our lives." It did, I agreed, but it didn't define them. He smiled at that. I also started making plans, real plans. I enrolled in a certification program to advance my career. I rearranged my apartment, turning it into a place that reflected who I was now, not who I used to be. I even said yes to a date. It didn't lead to anything serious, and that was okay. What mattered was that I felt ready to try, ready to open a door that fear had kept closed for a long time. That night, lying in bed, I realized something else. The house across the street, the one where danger once lived, no longer occupied space in my mind. I wasn't defined by where I'd been violated. I was defined by where I was going. The story wasn't over, but it was finally mine to tell on my own terms.
Telling the story was easy. Owning it was something else entirely.
For a long time, I spoke about what happened to me in careful, measured ways. I focused on facts, timelines, warnings, practical advice. It felt safer to talk around the experience rather than directly through it. That distance helped me function. But eventually, I realized it was also keeping part of me frozen. Owning the story meant allowing myself to speak emotionally, not just informatively. The first time I did, my voice shook. I was standing in front of a small audience at a community center, hands wrapped tightly around a paper cup of water. I told them about grief, about how vulnerability doesn't look like weakness. It looks like being human. And I told them something I hadn't said out loud before. I didn't feel brave when this was happening, I said. I felt tired, confused, afraid. Courage didn't show up as confidence. It showed up as asking for help when I didn't want to. The room was silent. Afterward, a woman approached me with tears in her eyes. "I always thought strong women don't get scared," she said. "Thank you for proving that wrong." That moment changed how I saw my own strength. I wasn't strong because nothing hurt me. I was strong because I didn't let pain erase me. Vincent told me later that hearing me speak that way gave him chills. "You've turned something terrifying into something that gives people power," he said. I carried that with me. I also began to see how my experience intersected with others in unexpected ways. Survivors of domestic abuse, stalking victims who were dismissed because they had no proof, women who were told they were overreacting. Their stories mirrored mine more than I wanted to admit. We weren't paranoid, we were perceptive. That realization fueled me. I worked with local officials to push for better awareness training, how to recognize stalking behaviors early, how to take reports seriously even before violence occurs. Progress was slow, but it was real. On a personal level, I stopped hiding parts of myself. I talked openly about therapy, about fear, about healing that didn't look pretty. The shame I once carried began to lose its grip. One evening, as I prepared notes for an upcoming talk, I caught myself smiling. Not because the topic was easy, but because it mattered. I was no longer defined by what happened to me. I was defined by what I did next. I learned that safety isn't about hiding, it's about awareness without fear. Safety used to mean locked doors and drawn curtains. After everything I'd been through, I thought safety would always be something external: systems, alarms, barriers between me and the world. Those things mattered, of course, but they weren't the whole picture. Real safety turned out to be internal. It was knowing I could trust my instincts without letting fear dominate me. It was understanding the difference between awareness and anxiety. It was feeling grounded in my body again. Dr. Moore helped me articulate that shift. "You're not trying to eliminate fear," she said. "You're learning how to coexist with it." That idea changed how I approached my life. I still checked locks, I still stayed aware of my surroundings, but I no longer treated every unfamiliar sound as a threat. I allowed myself to exist without constant vigilance. The advocacy work continued to grow, but I became more selective. I focused on quality over quantity, smaller groups, deeper conversations, practical tools that empowered rather than overwhelmed. One workshop focused entirely on recognizing early warning signs, not dramatic ones, but subtle patterns. Someone who appeared everywhere you went, someone who tracked your schedule a little too closely, someone who used helpfulness as a way to insert themselves into your life. When I described it, I saw heads nodding. These stories were everywhere. Vincent attended another session, this time participating in a panel about bystander awareness. Watching him speak about noticing patterns
about choosing to intervene despite uncertainty, made me realize something important. Prevention isn't about paranoia, it's about attention. After the event, I thanked him. "You changed the way I think about safety," I told him. He smiled gently. "You changed the way I think about responsibility." At home, my apartment had become a sanctuary, not because it was perfect, but because it was intentional. Every object in it felt chosen. Every corner felt claimed. I wasn't trying to recreate the past. I was building something new. One evening, I stood by the window and realized I wasn't checking who was outside anymore. I was just watching the city move. That quiet moment meant more to me than any milestone. I was safe, not because the world was harmless, but because I was prepared, aware, and grounded. And that was enough. For the first time, I stopped fearing the future and started letting it in. For a long time, I lived as if the future were something to be cautious of. I didn't plan too far ahead. I didn't imagine big changes. I stayed close to what felt manageable, as though hoping that if I kept my world small enough, nothing unexpected could slip through. That mindset had once protected me. Now it was limiting me. The realization came during a therapy session when Dr. Moore asked a simple question: "What are you looking forward to?" I opened my mouth and stopped. There were things I enjoyed, things I appreciated, but looking forward implied expectation, hope, trust in what hadn't happened yet. That felt risky. "Maybe it's time to practice that," she said gently. So I did. I started with small plans: a weekend trip with coworkers, a concert I'd always wanted to attend, things that required me to commit to future moments instead of staying anchored in the present out of fear. Each plan I kept became evidence that the future didn't have to be threatening. It could be exciting. I also allowed my relationships to deepen. Not all of them lasted. Some people drifted away naturally as my life changed. Others stepped closer. I learned to recognize which connections felt safe, mutual, and supportive. One of those was Vincent. Our friendship evolved slowly, intentionally. We talked more openly about our lives beyond the past: his family, his dreams, the things that motivated him. He listened when I spoke about mine without trying to fix or protect me. One evening, he said something that stayed with me. "You know you don't need me to watch over you anymore, right?" "I know," I replied, "but I like having you in my life." The difference mattered. At work, I completed my certification and was offered a new role. It meant more responsibility, but also more fulfillment. Saying yes felt like another way of choosing growth over fear. The advocacy work remained part of my life, but it no longer consumed it. I learned that my worth wasn't tied to constant action. Rest was allowed. Joy was allowed. Love, eventually, was allowed too. Not rushed, not forced, just possible. That realization softened something in me. The future no longer felt like a threat waiting to happen. It felt like an open door. And this time, I wasn't afraid to step through it. My life didn't return to normal. It became something better. The idea of normal used to bother me. After everything that happened, I worried I'd never feel normal again, that something essential had been permanently taken from me. I searched for the version of myself I used to be, as if returning to her would mean I'd finally healed. But I was learning that healing doesn't rewind time, it reshapes it. My new normal didn't look like the old one, and that was okay. Mornings became quieter, more intentional. I woke up without dread, without immediately running through worst case scenarios. Some days I even lingered in bed, letting the light filter in through the curtains. That small luxury once felt impossible. I still had triggers, certain sounds, certain situations, but they no longer controlled me. When fear surfaced, I acknowledged it, grounded myself, and moved forward instead of retreating. That was my new baseline. The advocacy work settled into a rhythm.
and mentored a small group of women who were early in their healing journeys. I never positioned myself as someone who had all the answers, only as someone who understood the terrain. I can't walk this for you, I told them, but I can walk beside you. Those relationships mattered deeply to me. One woman reminded me so much of myself in the early days, constantly apologizing, constantly questioning her own reactions. Watching her slowly reclaim her confidence felt like watching my own reflection catch up to the present. Vincent and I talked less about the past now, not because it didn't matter, but because it no longer dominated our connection. We shared jokes, frustrations, plans. One afternoon, he asked, "Do you ever miss who you were before?" I thought about it carefully. "I miss her innocence," I said, "but I respect who I am now." That felt true. I stopped measuring my progress by how little fear I felt and started measuring it by how much life I allowed myself to experience. I traveled. I said yes more often than no. I trusted my intuition without letting it isolate me. And slowly, without fanfare, life felt full again. Not perfect, but real. Just when I thought the past was behind me, it knocked on my door again. I didn't expect the past to resurface the way it did. It wasn't dramatic. There was no warning sign, no sudden sense of danger. Just an email, brief, clinical, and unsettling. It was from the victim notification system. Gerald had filed an appeal. Even though Dr. Moore had prepared me for moments like this, my hands still trembled as I read the message. Appeals were common, she'd said, procedural, rarely successful. Logic didn't stop the memories from flooding back. That night, sleep was difficult, not because I was afraid he would be released, but because the door I'd closed so carefully felt slightly ajar again. I reminded myself of what was true. He was incarcerated. The evidence was solid. I was not the same person I had been when this began. Still, the emotional weight surprised me. I reached out to Dr. Moore, to Vincent, to the support network I'd built. This time, I didn't try to carry it alone. "That's growth," Dr. Moore told me. "You're responding, not relapsing." Vincent sat with me at the diner, listening quietly as I talked through my fears. He didn't interrupt or reassure prematurely. He just let me speak. "He doesn't get to control your present," he said when I finished. "Not anymore." The appeal was denied weeks later. When the notification arrived, the relief was quieter than I'd imagined, but deeper. It felt earned. The experience taught me something important. Healing doesn't mean the past never knocks. It means you know how to answer without letting it move back in. I acknowledged what the email had stirred up. I processed it. And then I returned to my life, stronger for having faced it without unraveling. That was a victory I didn't know I needed. I didn't notice how far I'd come until I realized what no longer scared me. Growth is easy to miss when you're living inside it. I didn't wake up one morning feeling healed. There was no moment where everything clicked into place. Instead, I began noticing how differently I reacted to things that once would have undone me. That's how I measured how far I'd come. A loud noise behind me made me pause, but not panic. A stranger asking an innocent question didn't automatically set my nerves on edge. I could feel discomfort without being overwhelmed by it. Those were signs of progress. Dr. Moore suggested an exercise one afternoon. "Write a letter to the version of yourself from the beginning of this story," she said. "Tell her what she survives." I resisted at first. It felt heavy. But when I finally sat down to write, the words came easily. I told her she would be afraid, but not forever. I told her she would lose things she thought she couldn't live without and discover strength she didn't know she had. I told her she would build a life again, piece by piece, and that it would be meaningful. I cried when I finished, but it was a cleansing kind of release. The advocacy work reflected that same growth. I wasn't just helping people avoid danger anymore. I was showing them what recovery could look like, that fear didn't get the final word. At one event, a young woman asked me, "How do you stop feeling angry?" I answered honestly,
You don't. You learn where to put it. Anger became fuel instead of fire. Vincent noticed the shift too. You carry yourself differently, he said one evening, like you trust the ground beneath you. I smiled. That description felt right. Life continued to unfold. Some days were ordinary, some were joyful, some were challenging in ways unrelated to the past. And that, I realized, was the point. Trauma no longer defined the rhythm of my days. It was part of my history, not my identity. There was a time I stayed quiet to stay safe. Now I stand in the light. There was a time when I moved through the world quietly, carefully, as if taking up too much space might invite danger. I didn't do that anymore. I noticed the change one evening at a public event I'd been invited to speak at. The room was full, faces turned toward me, listening. Months ago, that kind of attention would have terrified me. Now, it grounded me. I spoke clearly, honestly, not just about what had happened, but about what came after, about rebuilding a sense of self, about learning that safety and freedom don't cancel each other out. Afterward, people approached me, not with pity, but with respect. That mattered more than I expected. I was no longer hiding from my story. I was standing in it. At home, my apartment felt warm and lived in. I hosted friends occasionally, something I once thought I'd never feel comfortable doing again. Laughter filled the space where fear once lived. I allowed myself to enjoy that contrast. Vincent and I talked less frequently now, but when we did, it was easy, natural, no unspoken weight hanging between us. I'm proud of you, he said during one of our calls. I know, I replied, smiling, and I'm grateful. Grateful for awareness, for intervention, for resilience, for the people who showed up when it mattered. I still believed in caution, but I believed more strongly in life. I walked at night without shrinking into myself. I made plans without assuming they'd fall apart. I trusted my intuition without letting it harden into fear. That balance was something I'd earned. Standing in the light didn't mean forgetting the darkness. It meant refusing to live there. Surviving wasn't the victory. Choosing how to live afterward was. I used to think survival was the end of the story, that once you made it through the worst of something, the rest would simply fall into place. But survival, I learned, is only the beginning. What comes after, the choices, the courage, the willingness to live fully, is what truly defines you. The life I have now wasn't handed to me. I chose it. I chose healing even when it was uncomfortable. I chose awareness without letting it become fear. I chose connection when isolation felt easier. I chose to trust myself again. Those choices added up. I still carry my past with me, I always will, but it no longer weighs me down. It informs me, strengthens me, reminds me of what I'm capable of. Sometimes I think about the version of myself who sat in a rideshare car late at night, exhausted and grieving, unaware of how close danger truly was. I wish I could reach back and tell her this. You survive. You grow. You build something new. And when I look at my life now, steady, purposeful, filled with meaning, I know she'd be proud. The story didn't end where it could have. It continued, and it became something powerful. This isn't a story about fear. It's about what happens after you refuse to let fear win. People often ask me how my story ends. I never know how to answer at first because endings suggest closure, and life doesn't really work that way. What I've learned is that some stories don't end cleanly. They evolve. They stretch forward, reshaping themselves as we grow. If this is an ending, it's a gentle one. I wake up each day grounded in the present, not untouched by the past, but no longer controlled by it. Fear doesn't sit in the driver's seat anymore. It rides quietly in the back, acknowledged but contained. That took time. It took patience, honesty,
and a willingness to face parts of myself I once avoided. It took learning that strength doesn't mean never being shaken, it means knowing how to steady yourself when you are. The danger I faced could have defined me. It didn't. Instead, it clarified what mattered: awareness, compassion, community, the power of paying attention to ourselves and to each other. I no longer measure my life by what I survived. I measure it by how fully I live, by the laughter in my home, by the trust I rebuilt in myself, by the moments of peace that once felt unreachable, by the knowledge that my voice has helped others feel less alone. This story isn't a warning, it's a reminder that intuition matters, that help can come from unexpected places, that healing is possible even after deep violation, and that life, when reclaimed intentionally, can be strong and meaningful again. If you're listening to this and something feels familiar, if a quiet alarm is going off inside you, pay attention. And if you're healing from something that changed you, know this: you are not broken. You are becoming. This is where my story rests. Not in fear, not in pain, but in choice. And that is how it ends.